If you've ever wondered just how the Israelites became slaves in the first place, then do our good friends over at Menno Media a huge favor. Mash that thumbs up, subscribe, and remember to ring that bell for notifications. There are a lot more top quality videos on the way for this series of Salt and Light. Welcome back, friends. Today, don't give up. Now, when I think of don't give up, I immediately think don't give up when the going gets tough, which reminds me of Joseph, sitting in Pharaoh's dungeon for 2 years, waiting to be remembered. But I think it's also important not to give up when the going gets easy. And for that to make sense, we're going to be digging a little bit deeper into something hinted at towards the end of the Discover section in today's lesson. Now, I came down with a cold this week, so I didn't quite have it in me to go all the way with this video, so please forgive me if I'm glancing down at my notes from time to time and breaking eye contact with you, like this. If you've spent a lot of time parsing through the book of Genesis with a fine-tooth comb lately, then a lot of what I will share with you today is going to be review. But if the last time you thought about Joseph was in primary Sunday school class, then it may come as a shock to you to realize that Joseph is the reason the Israelites go into slavery. Now, it's true that Joseph spends 2 years in Pharaoh's dungeon. It's also true that during that time, Pharaoh's chief jailer puts Joseph in charge of the whole prison. Foreshadowing anyone? Now, when Joseph gets out of prison, he does interpret Pharaoh's dream and engineer Egypt's survival of 7 years of famine, through which he also becomes reunited with his estranged family. Now, it's this part of the Joseph story that makes for an excellent Disney film. The rest of the Joseph story is a little bit more Kafka-esque. Here's what I mean. Once Joseph spends 7 years collecting 1/5 of all of the grain being grown in Egypt for the 7 abundant years, he then opens the storehouses of Egypt and begins selling the Egyptians' own grain back to them for money in the first year of the famine. But there's more. As the money runs out, the Egyptians come to Joseph for grain so that they can eat and live through the famine. And Joseph sells them the grain at the cost of their livestock. Now remember, in the ancient world, your livestock is how you cultivate the ground, it's how you plant things, it's how you harvest things. Your livestock is your means of production. And the following year, after the Egyptians have bought their own grain back from Joseph at the cost of their means of production so that they and their little ones can eat and live, then Joseph sells them back their own grain at the cost of their land and their lives. So you can see how Joseph is the reason that Pharaoh comes to own all of the labor, all of the means of production, and gets to have 1/5 of everything produced in Egypt forever, because at the end of the whole thing, Joseph still levies a 20% tax on all of the grain grown in Egypt for all time. Genesis chapter 47, verses 20 and 21. Thus Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. As for the people, Joseph made them slaves from one end of Egypt to the other. So Joseph is the reason that Pharaoh owns all of the labor, all of the means of production, and receives 1/5 of everything produced in Egypt forever. And this puts Joseph and the Israelites in a very precarious position, because when you give Pharaoh this kind of wealth and power, you're only safe as long as Pharaoh is your friend. Pages later, Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. Now a new king arose over Egypt, to whom Joseph meant nothing. You see, now that Pharaoh has all this wealth, power, and influence, he can make slaves out of anybody he wants. The interesting thing is that the writer of Genesis seems to have no problem whatsoever laying full responsibility for this course of events directly at the feet of Joseph the Israelite. So, is Joseph a hero or a villain? The scriptures force us to concede that he is neither. Fortunately, there's another option, a third way, if you will. In most mythologies, there is an archetypal character known as the trickster. Now, the trickster is neither good nor evil. They're not the villain, they're not the good guy. And they're not obligated by the hero's objectives or by the villain's goals. The trickster has just one job to do, and that is to make sense of the insensible. You see, the story of Joseph very nicely answers the question, how did we become slaves in Egypt in the first place? And on a deeper level, the question, what do we need the Torah for anyway? The story of Joseph answers these questions of existence and meaning with a cautionary tale about dubious uses of power, wealth, and privilege. Uses of power, wealth, and privilege that exploit rather than serve humanity, and that diminish and commoditize creation rather than nurture and enhance it.